Hi there! Thanks for joining us for our Thanksgiving special. We dedicate this show to all of you out there who either don't have a big family, can't get to your family, or just don't want to be with your family for this very special holiday. But you have somebody in your life that you're very thankful for. So we're going to show you how to put on a full Thanksgiving spread for two. So let's get started on the desserts very first. Usually people do the desserts a day ahead of time, but you can also do it the same day, just do it first. So we have a couple sheets of puff pastry here, my favorite little kitchen genie, and I've put them on a lightly floured surface, and I'm going to lightly roll them out so that they're a nice uniform shape and size. Keep in mind that when you're working with puff pastry, it's best when it's cold. The next thing we're going to do is cut out little flowers to put into the muffin tin. These will form your crust for your tasty little pies. A little rocking motion will help to free the cutout from the dough. Awesome. A little gentle stretching will help to ease the dough into the muffin tin. And look at that. Folds up and forms you a little crust. All right, now with my little petals even, I'm ready to add my delicious fillings. All right, ready to fill these cute little shells. So I can never decide between apple pie and pumpkin pie. I love them both so much. So let's just make them both. I have diced up green apples here. I have tossed them in sugar and flour and cinnamon. Just some simple flavorings. And with the other ones, I'm going to fill it up with a little pumpkin mixture. I use just a classic pumpkin recipe for my pumpkin pie. So when I have pumpkin pie, I want pumpkin pie. Nothing strange. Just the classic for me. Beautiful. Now I'm going to whip up a little crumb topping to pour over the apple. I have butter and brown sugar and whole oats here. And I'm going to mix them together with a fork. With the oats and the sugar and the butter all incorporated, I'm going to add a little bit of flour to this to make it more of a crumbly mixture. So once you have enough flour in there that you have a crumbly texture, just go ahead and sprinkle it on top of your little apple tartlets here. Kind of making like a little mini Dutch apple pies. It'll be delicious. All right, let's bake these off. About 375 degrees for about 25 to 35 minutes. So if it's just the two of you having dinner, there's no reason to cook a full turkey, so I suggest cooking a turkey breast. And if you cook the full turkey breast, then you still get the benefits of the leftovers. So start by sprinkling some spices and herbs over the top of the turkey. I'm using black pepper and thyme and salt and a little bit of allspice and some Italian herb mix. Press it into the turkey so that the spices stay on there. So start out by cooking the turkey without basting it. This allows the fats in the skin to come to the surface and make that nice crisp skin that we all love. So what you want to do for this stuffing recipe is begin by browning your vegetables and the apples. So drop the carrots, the celery, and the shallots into the hot butter. To that, add the apples and the hazelnuts. You're just gonna sweat this out. You actually don't want these to brown at all, so keep them on a nice low temperature and let them just kind of turn translucent. So now you can see that the shallots and the celery and the carrots have started to become a little bit translucent. So this is a great time to add a little bit of Italian herb and some fresh cracked pepper. And then go ahead and fold in the roasted garlic and the breadcrumbs. Yummy. So I've gone with shallots in this instead of onions because of their smoother, sweeter flavor. As for the bread, you can use whatever type of bread you have laying around the house. In my case, I had some fresh sourdough bread. So as you're folding it together, make sure you take a little taste of it. Yummy, that's really good. Add a little salt, and then drop it in your baking pan. I'm gonna set this aside till we have some turkey drippings to mix in with it as well. So I've got a little mix here of butter and fresh homemade applesauce, and we're gonna use that to baste our turkey. So the turkey's been baking for about 20 minutes now, and it's starting to get a nice little crust on it. So I'm gonna pull it out of the oven, and we're gonna baste it over here. Smelling wonderful. So the applesauce adds thickness to the marinade and also adds a little sweetness, so you get that sweet and savory thing going on. And the butter, of course, well, that just makes it brown and amazing and delicious, crispy and crunchy. So let's go ahead and put this back in the oven. So if you're gonna make cranberry sauce for two, I recommend using dried cranberries. That way you don't have a whole bunch of extra sauce laying around for weeks and weeks after the feast is over. For fun, add about a tablespoon of minced crystallized ginger and then a bunch of dark rum to it. Just enough dark rum to cover it. Zest an orange into it. And pour orange juice over the top. And just want to let this sit on nice low heat for about an hour so that those cranberries become plump. All right, so the mashed potatoes have been diced and dropped in boiling water, seasoned with a little salt and pepper. We'll come back to these when they're just about done. And now we're gonna get the yams going. So I like to keep the candied yams just a classic, simple recipe. And this is the recipe that my child dreams were made of. It's very simple. It's just yams, butter, brown sugar, and marshmallows. So I like to take the butter and kind of spread it over the top in chunks. About a 1/4 cup butter. Nice generous amount of brown sugar. So I've added some turkey drippings and water and some seasonings over the tops of the stuffing. And I'm gonna wrap it up with some foil, keep it nice and tight. And we're gonna go ahead and put these in the oven. Perfect. The potatoes are just about done, so now I'm gonna add the chanterelle mushrooms for about 1 minute. just because they need to cook in order to be safe to eat. All right, so we're going to drain these off. And once the water has drained out, just put them back in the pot. Back over here to your burner. We'll turn the heat off. And start by adding a couple tablespoons of butter. Add a little bit of milk. And then some lovely goat cheese. Smash it and blend it all up. Give it a taste. That tastes so good. Put a lid on it to keep them warm. Then you can come back to these when dinner's ready. And we're moving on to the broccoli au gratin. So what you want to do is start by adding a little bit of butter to the top of the broccoli. Kind of like buttering the treetops. Then we're moving on to the breadcrumbs, the gratin topping. So put most of this gorgonzola cheese on top of the breadcrumbs. And begin smashing the breadcrumbs and the cheese together. You may find that you need a little bit of heat from your own hands to help spread the cheese through the breadcrumbs. At least that's what I'm finding. It's going to depend on what type of gorgonzola cheese you're using. Once you have the cheese all distributed through the breadcrumbs, add a few crumbles of the cheese, the pure cheese, on top of the broccoli to give it a little head start. And then top it off with your delicious breadcrumbs. Yum! I love gorgonzola cheese for this purpose. It's got so much flavor and texture to it. Make sure the broccoli's all covered. This is ready to go in the oven. Back to this cranberry sauce here. As you can see, the cranberries have plumped up quite nicely. Most of the liquid has been absorbed. Perfect. So I'm just going to finish squeezing off this orange juice. I'm going to whisk in about a tablespoon of cornstarch. You want to whisk in cornstarch into the liquid when it's cold, or else it'll get lumpy. And we're going to pour that into the cranberry sauce. Drop in a little sachet of bay leaf, cinnamon, and allspice. And then you're going to bring it up to a boil, drop it down to a simmer, and let it finish itself off. And now it's time to work on what many people think is the best part of the Thanksgiving dinner, the gravy. So we're going to start by making a classic roux, which calls for about 2 tablespoons of butter and about a tablespoon of flour. And what you're going to want to do is cook the butter and the flour together. It's going to add thickness to your gravy, and the darker you cook it, the darker the flavor of the gravy will be too. So I'm going to take this to a light brown color. That looks great. What a beautiful color. To that I will add the turkey drippings. Take it off the heat for a few minutes. When it cools down a little bit more, we'll add some milk into it. Now it's cooled down a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and add the milk. I'm going to temper it in, so I'm going to add it just a little tiny bit at a time here. By adding it in little bits at a time, you reduce the chance of your milk breaking. Once you've got a nice base in there, you can go ahead and pour a whole bunch in at once. Awesome. Whisk it until it's nice and smooth. And then put a lid on it so you can bring it up to a boil and then drop it down to a simmer. You're going to want to simmer it until the flavor of the flour cooks out. Now, what would a Thanksgiving feast be without some flaky rolls? So whip out the Kitchen Genie, your puff pastry, and I'll show you how to make some quick and easy rolls. So I pulled this out onto a lightly floured surface, and I rolled it out a little bit too so that I had a more even shape. And now I'm cutting it into large triangles. And then cut them into smaller triangles yet. Now, puff pastry is much easier to handle when it's cold, so don't let it sit out on the counter too long after it's defrosted. Stick it back in the fridge until right before you're ready to use it. And begin rolling. Tuck its little front ends around, squish them together, drop it in your pan. Let's go bake these. This will take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to pure flaky perfection. So every feast like this requires a delicious salad to go with it. I'm making Waldorf salad tonight. So I have 1 apple, a handful of grapes, a handful of walnuts, and a handful of finely minced celery. And to that I'm going to add a little dollop of sour cream. And another dollop of mayonnaise. I'm just going to stir it up. Add a bit of salt. Just a touch of cayenne pepper. That looks great. Taste one. It's coming together very nicely. Now it's time to add just a little bit of sugar. You may not need to add sugar if you're using a sweeter apple, but I like the crisp green apples, so I'm adding a little sugar. Set it on a bed of greens. In my case, I'm using spinach. That'll be a nice little complement to this amazing feast. May love fill your home.
No matter how big or small. Happy Thanksgiving to all.